So I've had my iPhone 14 Pro Max for over a month now, almost 2 months, and since I shared my experience ordering the iPhone, picking it up from the Apple store and unboxing it, I thought I would also share my review of the iPhone and my experience with it and let you know if I think it was worth the upgrade, because it was almost $2,000 for me. The prices depend a lot on where you live, and I bought my iPhone in Sweden, so it was a bit more expensive than in the US. Alright, but let's start from the beginning. So I did have kind of high expectations for this iPhone. Apple really hyped up the dynamic island, but this is what we got. Don't get me wrong, I definitely think it's a big improvement and the iPhone is definitely better off with the dynamic island. Looking back at the iPhone 13, it feels really weird not having the dynamic island. So once you upgrade, you'll definitely get used to it and it's something you'll really appreciate. But I guess I just expected more from the dynamic island, just that it would integrate with more apps, which is slowly happening. More apps are coming out with an upgrade that lets you integrate the app with the dynamic island. There are still a lot of apps that aren't integrated with it, so I think in a few months in 2023 it will definitely be an even better experience. But a few apps I'm really excited for to integrate with the dynamic island are flight tracking apps, so you can have all the flight information on your screen, offering up necessary information like time until departure, gate, flight status. I think that will be really useful when traveling. Another app starting to integrate with the dynamic island is an app called Landscape, which is using live activities on the lock screen. The app shows elevation, total distance, and more. But so far, the app I've used the most with the dynamic island is probably Spotify. It's actually really useful to just be able to click the dynamic island to see what song is playing and pause it. And I've also found the dynamic island really useful when I record voice memos. So for example, I can keep my notes app open while also being able to pause the voice memos without having to switch apps like I did before. And also the timer is really useful to have on the dynamic island, to just be able to click it and pause it at any time. And something else I've really been appreciating with iPhone 14 Pro Max is the amount of cases that are already available. So this is the case I currently have on my iPhone 14 Pro Max, and this case is from a brand called mkeke. You can find these cases on Amazon and I've been trying out all of them. I'm absolutely in love with this gradient design. It's so pretty and I love switching between the different colors as well. These cases are super good quality. They are wear resistant, scratch resistant, anti-yellow, so they don't turn yellow over time. And what I love the most is how slim it is. It doesn't even add any weight or makes my phone more bulky. It's really super easy to hold in your hand compared to other cases, but also it has really good protection. You can see at the edges. These cases have dual protection, so they have built-in airbags in all of the four corners and extended edge protection. It's honestly one of the most comfortable iPhone cases I've ever had. And that's also something a lot of people have been asking me, if I'm happy with the Pro Max size, and I will never be switching from the Pro Max models. I think they are just a lot better for everything. Watching YouTube videos, working, taking notes, being on social media. So I'm really thankful for cases like these that don't add too much bulk to the already big size of this Pro Max model. So if you're looking for an iPhone 14 Pro Max case, I would really recommend these cases. And if you click the link in my description and use my discount code, you'll get 15% off. Now, something I was really excited for when getting the iPhone 14 Pro Max was the battery life. I used to have the iPhone 12 Pro Max and I would have to charge my phone multiple times a day. I would charge it fully through the night, and just a few hours into the day, it would be down at like 20% again. So I was really expecting the 14 Pro Max to perform really well in battery life. And if you look at the specs, you can actually see that the iPhone 14 Pro Max has up to 29 hours video playback. The iPhone 13 Pro Max has 28 hours, which isn't a big difference, so there's only 1 hour more for the iPhone 14 Pro Max. but for the iPhone 12 Pro Max, they only have up to 20 hours. That probably explains why I felt like my iPhone 12 Pro Max battery performed a lot worse. I don't have to charge my phone usually throughout the day. However, I did expect it to perform better than it has. I often find myself in the afternoon or at night being down at like 30-20%, but I actually think that has more to do with iOS 16. I've heard a lot of people say that ever since they updated to iOS 16, their battery life has been so much worse. Let me know if you have experienced any of that. I'm not sure because I switched to the new iPhone 14 Pro Max at the same time when I upgraded to iOS 16, so I don't really have any comparison. So moving on to the always on display. This is a feature that has existed on Androids for a really long time now, and Apple finally picked up on it. So it shows a dim version of the lock screen and you can clearly see what time it is, especially if you use this clear heavy font for a lock screen. And if you have a phone stand on your desk and keep your phone on it, it actually makes a pretty aesthetic clock. The only thing I find could be a negative aspect of the always on display is if you have any application running such as Spotify, you're playing a song, it will show up as a widget on your lock screen, and since you have the always on display on, you're gonna be able to see the cover of the song or podcast you're listening to, and other people will be able to see that as well. Even if the phone is a little bit dimmed, you'll still be able to tell what's going on your phone. And yeah, if you don't want to show that, you might have to flip your phone, but you could also always turn off the always on display if you don't want to have that feature on. On Android, you can usually only see the time and nothing on the screen. Like the screen will be all black even if it has always on display. But Apple is very literal with always on display. Like it's literally always on. You can always see the background and what's going on the screen. But the positive thing with this, it might not be a bad thing. That way you'll be able to see all the activities from the widgets on your lock screen without having to turn on the phone and press it. You can be at a distance and still see what's going on your phone. But the real question is, how much battery does the always on display use? Thought this would be really fun to find out if there was any difference in the battery performance when I kept the always on display on versus when I kept it off. So I did a little test, so let's take a look at it. Okay, so it's currently 11:23 and my phone is at 52%. So I'm gonna leave this for an hour with the always on display on, and we'll see what it's at when I come back. It's been exactly an hour and I'm gonna check the battery percentage of the phone, and it's at 51%. I'm gonna leave it again for an hour and we're gonna come back and check if it went down an additional 1%. Okay, and now it's been 2 hours. It's 1:23 and let's check the battery. It's actually at 49%. That's really interesting. So now let's check how much it drains when I turn off the always on display. And I charged my phone, so it's currently at 50% again. It's currently 3:29, so I'm gonna leave this for an hour and then come back. Okay, so it's been an hour and the battery is still at 50%, so I'm gonna leave it for another hour. Alright, so it's been one more hour. Oh, it's still at 50%. I think that it proves the point that the always on display really drains more battery. For me, upgrading from the 12 Pro Max to the iPhone 14 Pro Max, it was a really big upgrade in terms of the camera. If we look at the specifications, we can see that the iPhone 14 Pro Max has 48 megapixel main camera, while the iPhone 13 and 12 Pro Max has a 12 megapixel main camera. But the thing is, shooting in 48 megapixels is actually something you don't want to do for the most part. There are a few occasions when shooting in 48 megapixels is better than shooting in 12. So the only occasions I could see where you might want to use the 48 megapixel camera is if you intend to print the photo in a large size. Say if you want to put it up on your wall and you want it to be really good quality, or if you need to crop the image very heavily and zoom in a lot. But also that's kind of questionable, because if you do want to crop it, you might just be better off shooting in the 3 times zoomed in camera and you'll get that cropped good quality already as it is without having to crop the original image. But also the only time you actually shoot in 48 megapixels is in really good lighting and when you're using the main camera, so not the telephoto or wide angle, and when you're shooting in ProRAW, and this is actually turned off by default. So if you got the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you're probably not even shot in 48 megapixels. So the iPhone 14 has something new called photonic engine. I wasn't sure what this was about, but I started noticing when photos were taken in like really low lighting situations or they just weren't in the best conditions. When scrolling in my camera roll, the phone automatically adjusted the pictures, and it actually did a really great job. Quoting, the photonic engine uses hardware machine learning software to boost your photos, particularly those shot in less than ideal lighting. It's pretty funny that I didn't even like really pay attention to this feature, but I noticed it was happening and I was like, wow, this is actually really cool and useful. I don't have to manually go through all of my photos and adjust the lighting. And for example, it often makes the subject a lot lighter, but I actually did a full video about the iPhone 14 Pro Max camera and filming a day in my life with this phone, so I will link that in the description. And here's also some comparison footage between the iPhone 14 Pro Max and 13 Pro Max. And as you can see, you can't really tell a big difference, at least not looking at it on YouTube, probably if you're not watching on a really big screen, but I can definitely see a little improvement in quality and also white balance and just how it balances out those really warm or really cold tones. The only thing I haven't been too happy about with this camera is actually the Snapchat camera. On Snapchat, you often take really quick pictures. You just pick up your phone, snap a picture in 1 second and send it to someone. I've started noticing a lot of my pictures get really blurry, like actual blurry even in good lighting, and this has actually never happened before. I don't really know why this is happening with the iPhone 14 Pro Max. I don't really care a lot about that because Snapchat isn't really for taking professional photography anyway, so it doesn't really matter, but it's still kind of annoying that some pictures just turn out blurry. Alright guys, but that was my little review of the iPhone 14 Pro Max so far. So to the question if it's worth it or not, I would say it is. I think it's a great phone, and especially the dynamic island. It's been really useful, and I'm really looking forward to the future when it will get even more useful. However, was it worth almost $2,000? Maybe not. I would say if the dynamic island is the only reason for upgrading, it would probably be better to wait a few months and probably until the next iPhone drop, because then you'll have a much wider selection for apps that will integrate with the dynamic island. It will be a much better user experience once all the apps have caught up. Apps haven't really taken full advantage of the new dynamic island, so it's really hard to say how useful the dynamic island really is. So far I would say it's useful. I feel like it could be a lot more useful, but it's definitely better than having no dynamic island at all. But if you want to see more videos on the iPhone 14 Pro Max, definitely subscribe so you don't miss anything. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in my next video. Bye!